I'm going to record this. All right, recording is in progress. All right, so in this chapter, we're going to talk about incidents and problems, ownership of incidents. All of this is from the perspective of a person working in the service desk or the incident management, or with an incident management system. How do we manage the work? So from that person's perspective, so the idea is you thinking of yourself as somebody working in the service desk. Okay, so we need to have these definitions, and I think we've already talked to you about these, but let's just look at them again. Incident is an unplanned interruption, and I know we've had this because I saw it in test questions that I marked for you last week. Unplanned interruption of an IT service, reduction in quality of service. So something is broken, or something we have a interruption of some kind, or so we call that an incident. Another word we use is outage. It's an outage. Sorry, my goodness. Let's get back to that. Problem, on the other hand, is going to be something which is going to be a little bit more systematic. So it could involve multiple incidents of the same type, which have a common cause. So when we talk about a problem, we are talking about root causes that lead us to multiple incidents. Then we're talking about a problem. So when we're talking about a problem, we're getting at something more systematic. We're getting at something which is a root cause of something. Now this diagram that you see here is a diagram out of an ITIL management sort of a textbook or whatever. And so you see the way that ITIL looks at problems and incidents. And so the service desk or help desk, we can say what's going on there is incident management. That is, that incidents come into it. See that alerts coming from a monitoring service. They could also be coming from directly from our customers. So alerts come in, and then there are people within the service desk that can manage those. They're IT experts. But it could be that the incident is part of a problem. That is, it's a recurring incident where there's a root cause that needs to be found and addressed and solved, in which case we have to move on to sort of problem management. Now, problem management is a different idea. It doesn't mean that it's a different place where this is happening, or even different people. It could be the same person who's doing incident management is also doing problem management, or it could be that we have a special section that we work with that. And I think you could see in your mind, if you thought about the levels of incident management, a service desk, we talked about levels, level 1, level 2, and level 3. If we were to separate out problem management, then I guess that would be more like a level 2 sort of thing, where we got our engineers looking at systemic problems. That would be probably pretty well suited to problem management. Now, how change management is represented in there, and the idea of that is once we've determined what a root cause is of multiple incidents, there may be some systematic change that needs to be made to the system completely, so that we don't have that recurrence in the future. Anyway, so these diagram tools, I hope you've seen these before. These are tools for a flowchart. Flowchart is a tool that we could use to help us with problem management. It's one of many tools. We have lots of other tools and lots of other even charting tools that we can use. Flowchart is one. It's been a pretty good one because the idea of the flowchart is we break things up into tasks and we look at what task happens before another task. So it's really a flow of control time idea. Again, we have these two terms referred to here, incident and problem management. In this case, we're putting them kind of together as these things happening together in the service desk. And when we are working in the service desk, these steps here we would include. Now, these steps, we have a tool to help us do that, and that is our incident management system. So, for example, I asked you to do a little part of an assignment, I guess you could say, with the OTRS. Many of you have already done that, in which case you have done a sort of a logging there, which is a customer incident has come in and we've logged that into the system. Whatever has been put into the OTRS system that's there, it's going to be recorded. Now, other people may be tagged on that ticket. And then they could be involved in the investigation, or it could happen with the person themselves who actually recorded it. But of course, they need to identify it, and you see all of that happens on the ticket, right? We identify it. We have a name for the incident, who it involves, and a description of what's going on, and then we go into these. The investigation and diagnostics will be happening with the ticket there in front of the people who are doing that. When the resolution occurs, then that is updated to the ticket, and the ticket is finally closed. So we actually have in the incident management system, we have all of these things taken sort of care of. So again, talking about problems, problem management, the diagram that you see on the side there is sort of relates to ITIL, but the concept that you should get out of it is a sort of a spiraling upwards or virtuous cycle. A virtuous cycle is a cycle that goes upwards towards perfection or towards improvement. And this is the underlying or underpinning sort of framework upon which ITIL rests. So the idea is that we want to continually improve our service that we're offering to our IT customers. And so we use ITIL to help us to do that, and ITIL specifies certain processes that we need to do. And some of those processes are achieved using, for example, the incident management software. So a problem, there's a process that we go about to sort of solve problems. Let's see if we can get onto that. So process is going to be interrelated work activities, and they will happen in a certain sequence. The flowchart that we see here, this is not a flowchart, yes. It is a flowchart. The idea of the flowchart is it shows the step-by-step, what step follows what step. So not everything happens at once. One thing precedes another, one thing comes after another, and that's represented nicely by our flowchart. And so we have this idea of a procedure. Procedures can be nicely translated into a flowchart. So flowchart's a very nice diagramming tool. You can find flowcharts on Visio, which is a Microsoft product. You can find flowcharts if you just Google on the internet. There's lots of free ones in the cloud, and in particular, if you chose draw.io, you can get to a nice free charting software. Okay, so incident management, I've talked about that a little bit. That's what's happening in the service desk. That's what's happening with the incident management software, like the OTRS, which we've seen. We log things, we track things, we resolve things. Now the symptom, that's going to be what is observed by you or the customer that they see as part of their outage. Now we call it a symptom because it's not necessarily the underlying cause. The symptom is what we see, but there may be an underlying cause that could cause some other symptoms, or maybe to cause this symptom to reoccur and reoccur and reoccur. And that's why we talk about a problem separately from a incident, and that's why we talk about root cause analysis and root cause solutions. So the probable source is about that. So if we have a symptom, okay, so that's showing that's our incident, but what is actually causing that? I also referred to that just now as the root cause. And so on, here it is again. So coming up, basically saying the same thing. The root cause is what is actually causing this to happen. Why are we having this? This diagram is actually worth looking at and studying for you. I think you should have a look at it because it shows within the one diagram there the three levels of our service desk. So we got our level 1 support, our level 2 support, and our level 3 support. So a customer comes in with a problem and they'll contact the service desk that will be at the level 1. If the level 1 can resolve the problem or the incident, then we'll get some verification on that and we'll close it. So that you can see if things that are handled completely within the service desk themselves, it's pretty linear, pretty straightforward, and a much shorter path. However, if the person at the level 1 is not able to resolve that for whatever reason, they don't just drop it. We have escalation, right? So we can't solve it, or for whatever reason, we don't have the tools, don't have the expertise, we don't have the time, we don't have the people, whatever. For whatever reason, we escalate that, and we usually escalate it to level 2. Level 2 is where we're going to have subject matter experts, engineers, and they will look at it at trying to find the root cause. That's why we're referring to the term there, problem, and they may resolve it. Now, if they resolve it, do you notice that there's a couple of extra steps that have to happen if it went up to level 2? Because if it went up to level 2, that means that we have a systemic problem. There's a root cause, which it means there's something wrong with our system that needs a change. Therefore, we have to go through change management and do some kind of little update of the system, and that'll have to be recorded. Now, if the people at folks at our subject matter experts in-house are not able to sort of manage that, then we're going to have to take that and escalate it further to level 3, which could involve getting subject matter experts from our vendors. So, for example, like Microsoft engineers that we have a contract with to support our thing, to get them involved to help us solve the issue. And hopefully they would resolve it, in which case we'll still have to go through the change management. So the incident management system is going to be used by our people in the service desk. Talked about that. It is a good idea to, as it says there, distinguish between incidents and queries. Incident is going to always be some kind of outage. All right, so once we have identified, and do you remember back there we said that there's kind of steps that we have to do for solving for problems, and the first one is they're identifying. So once we've identified what is the major symptom or outage or a problem, then we need to go about sort of analyzing it, as it says here, gather as much information as we can, diagnose the incident, and develop a course of action. So the next slide, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, just enough to say that there's not just one way that we gather data. Of course, the customer is going to tell us that, this is what I saw, these things happen, blah, blah. But especially if we're investigating something that we think is more systemic, we might have to go and use some other tools to gather some data about what is actually sort of happened, what is the problem. So here's some kinds of data that we could also look at. Customer data, we can look at database as incident data. Maybe we've got some data in our incident management system about similar incidents that have happened before. And I'm not going to go through that. It's just basically about that data. I don't think that we should spend a lot of time talking about that. The idea being that we gather data as much as we can so that we're aware of what we're doing, what the issue is, so that we can come up with some kind of a solution. Once we've gathered our data and analyzed all the different aspects as much as we can about this incident or this problem, then we'll come up with some kind of problem definition, as it says here, and descriptive. And so we may at that point decide that this is something quite systemic, the problem idea. And somebody's raised a hand. What's that about?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so before, actually in previous classes we had doing it from scratch and learning from it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, oh yeah, it's good, very good. So thanks for that.
Thanks.
That's Mohammed, right? Good question.
Yes.
So where were we? Let's go on to the next bit. So we've got like 5 or 6 steps here that just relate to problem management, and you can look at them as problem management kind of in general. These types of things, if you just sit down, somebody gives you a project that you have to do, to implement a new sort of system, they'll say, right? So you could use these steps to sort of help with that as well. However, you would be forced to use these steps in a way, I suppose, if you're presented with a problem on your information system. So your information system for whatever is having these repeated incidents. Then you'll go and do these things. So our second step there is once we've sort of identified it, we're going to diagnose that incident. When we mean diagnose, we're going to start digging around there to see if we can find this probable cause source. Probable cause is not the right word. That's probable cause is actually a technical word used in law enforcement, right? I mean, no, the probable source. What is the actual root cause of what's going on? Now, the idea of this diagram here is to show that supposing you had a customer that came to you with an incident saying, I'm not able to use my printer, which is connected to print out my thing, which is sitting on the cloud. Then the idea is that there are many different points of failure that are possible for that particular incident. And so as part of your sort of problem solving, you're going to have to sort, and your diagnosis is where exactly is the point of failure at here, right? So is it in the network? Is it in the printer? Is it in the software? Is it in what's on the cloud? So your isolation of where the point of failure is, that's part of your diagnosis of the problem or the incident. And so some of the things that you can do to help you to identify that, supposing you have that problem, that incident brought to you, look, you know, I can't print on this, I can't print my stuff from the cloud to this printer, then we can go and ask them some questions to sort of identify it. It's almost kind of like being a detective. You're doing this process of elimination kind of thing. And so, yeah, so that could be, yeah. Now the simulating, we've got a couple of slides just on simulating. The idea of simulating is that we have a software which is kind of like the one that we're using, the live one, but it's offline or not live, and we'll try and reproduce the problems that you're having in our isolated system. And by doing that, maybe we can find out what's wrong with our system. Yeah, these other things, I hope that's already familiar to you about active listening and that type of thing. We do use checklists. Anywhere where there's a really low tolerance of errors, checklists are very good because they make sure that we don't skip over things. And that's why, for example, pilots in airplanes, they always have the checklist, and both the pilot and the co-pilot go through the checklist, make sure all the technical things are right before they take off in the plane. And that's probably because planes are sort of, even at takeoff and landing, they're going, you know, a couple 100 kilometers an hour. And if they stop really quickly, bad things happen to people, right? So, you know, it's very important that we don't have any sort of any failures. There's no tolerance for technical defects. And so a checklist is a good way of ensuring that you don't have a tolerance for technical defect. But it's also a very good way of identifying any technical defect that we might not have observed otherwise. And so checklists could be a very good way of sort of finding a problem, the root cause of a problem and you see this checklist, these are questions that we could answer, go through this list, and it's a good way of sort of excluding various things that could be the cause of what our incident is. Yeah, so the simulator here, as it says there, I've already sort of talked about that just a minute ago, which is we isolate, have an isolated version of that system running where the user, the IT person can sort of play with it and experiment and find things that might be broken with it. Now, the idea of using standards, enforce standards on users, that really came out of the, well, we don't need to go into too much history, but if you can imagine, it was in the early 2000s, there were a lot of competing technologies, a lot of which have died. And so at the moment, I don't think this is so much of an issue, but because, for example, well, we do have some competing technologies. Yes, we do, because we have Apple technology, Linux versus Windows operating system. So that's still a little bit there. It's not nearly the amount of competing technologies as it was before. So, so let's just look at that. Supposing, well, not too many people are coming to work with a Linux laptop, right? But your office will standardize on one or the other. We don't want to have one person doing all of their databases in a Linux shell, and another person doing all of their databases running off Windows. I mean, that will be splitting up the technical expertise too much. And so what the companies will generally do is we'll say, okay, we're going to be a Microsoft house, or we're going to be a Linux house. We're not going to just let you choose whatever technology you want. So that's the idea of standards. Then we can focus on the technology that we have. We can become experts ourselves in that way, and we can provide a better service. So that's it. We simplify our environment. People are able to talk to each other. That's the improved ability to share data. I mean, so we don't have a lot of people are using MySQL and another one are using Maria or something like that. We are able to talk to each other without having to sort of translate. It does keep things cheaper as well. So some other tools that we have, we can actually run software over our systems and sort of check what's happening in their databases, or we can measure the ins and outs of what's coming in and out of our systems. Some of that software is actually used by people that are called computer auditors to see if they can, looking for fraud actually, but we can also use that kind of software or similar software to find issues in our systems themselves. And this diagram here is one that purports to do that. So yeah, we talked about that, and we got 10 minutes left. So once we've decided exactly what the problem is, we come up with a course of action. Generally, we actually come up with multiple courses of action, and we choose the best. So once we've decided what we're going to do and we've chosen the best, then we can go ahead and start sort of implementing. So this is about the choosing the best. We've got various problems, various solutions that we can choose from, and we pick the one that we like best. It could be that we have to get additional resources. I hope that's obvious to you, and that's a big part of the idea of having the level 3. So that's the idea of escalation. Escalation means that we bring more resources to solving the problem. And so that could be taking the problem, the ticket, and sending it to level 2 or even to level 3. Each of those is considered an escalation, or sending it to the manager. If we send it to the management has more resources at their fingers, and they can do more with it. The idea of taking ownership, a couple more slides on this. The idea of that is at the service desk, that person opens up the ticket. They are responsible for that incident. They have ownership of it. That's what we mean by ownership. They might escalate that ticket to level 2 or level 3. When they do, they'll either transfer the ownership to that level 2 technician, in which case they have to close it, or they maintain the ownership of it, in which case they have to keep contacting that other technician, and they'll have to close the ticket afterwards. So they've got 2 ways of doing it. Normally, they would manage the ownership themselves. By the ownership, that means they also would be the single point of contact with the customer. But as I said, it is possible that they would transfer the ownership to the level 2. But in this diagram, I hope you can see that unbroken line. That's indicating that the level 1 support person is maintaining ownership of that incident, even though it's being escalated up to other people within our organization. And so that's what we mean by the incident owner. That would be that person that answered the phone and recorded the incident in the OTRS system, for example, in the first place. They keep the ownership of it. That means that somebody cares about that ticket. It doesn't get lost. That's the idea of ownership, that we don't have a ticket that gets lost in the system and nobody cares about it and it never gets solved. So the person who has the ownership, they have a responsibility to make sure that ticket is closed. If they can't do it, they get somebody in to do it. That's the idea of the ownership. As mentioned here, they can transfer the ownership to somebody in level 2. They can share it with somebody else. That's fine, as long as the person who's having that ownership shared understands that now they have to do what you were going to be doing before, which is actually keeping in contact with the customer, making sure the customer knows what's happening and that the incident is closed. Now we got a bunch of slides here about keeping in contact and or notification here. Two types of people that need to be communicated with our management and our customer. Now, of course, management going to have to be notified if we have an incident which is not soluble in the normal sort of time frames. Or where the management needs to be brought in because more resources are needed, or because it's a really critical problem. Then we need to notify the management about that and keep them informed. And that's about that. If the problem is not being resolved within a reasonable time, if it's a critical problem, basically anything that's going to impact back on management, they need to be made aware of it. And so we notify them in that way. Where we might do that by attaching a sort of a carbon copy from our emails, or we might just notify them directly. That's up to us and on the systems that we have in place in our organization. Customers also need to be notified, particularly if the ticket is not going to be closed within our normal timeframes. We're going to have to notify them about that, but generally notifying them about all the steps as they're going on. I don't know if you could have too much notification. Basically, there should be some expected level of notification, and certainly it should be within the time frame where you of any assurances that you've made to the customer. So you might be saying to the customer, well, I'll talk to you about that tomorrow. In which case, yeah, definitely, you call them tomorrow or before tomorrow, not after. By keeping them informed, I hope that you can see that it's obvious how that's going to benefit, right? If they're not informed, all kinds of things happen in their mind. They think that they've been left alone. And the other thing is that they're still out there without a solution. If they haven't got a solution, then they should know why. All right, so just a little bit there about, I think we're winding down to the end. Service desk add value. The idea here is that in the service desk, we're recording every incident that's occurring, and we're recording how we solve the incident. So the idea there is we get better after time. Remember we showed the diagram with the spiral going upwards, continual improvement. Service desk is supposed to bring that. How it brings continual improvement is every time we solve a problem, we don't just throw that away. We keep a record of that. We do that in a thing called a knowledge base. And then if we see that something is not just an incident, it's a problem, we go and do some change management. All these things, Mohammed, we were talking about, all these things are ITIL. So ITIL, basically, if we follow ITIL, we're going to get on that spiral going upwards. So that's how the service desk is going to improve things, by not letting the same incident occur over and over again. If we see that incident is occurring over and over again, we know we have to change our system. That's improving. And that's the idea of prevention is better than cure. The properly implemented, well-defined and well-used and well-managed service desk is going to prevent a lot of incidents, because things are going to be identified quickly. Root causes are going to be identified, and they're going to be put into a change management process. The change management process is going to be followed, and the system is going to be healed and repaired. All right, so there's a little bit there about the interactions between, and I've got 2.5 minutes, so I'm going a bit quickly. The interactions between the service desk analyst at level 1 and level 2. Remember, if we say they're different, what the difference is that the level 1 person is going to be sort of more of a person that has broad skills, is able to solve lots of different problems at a certain level. Whereas the person at level 2 is going to have very focused skills that is able to solve very, very, very much more technical and detailed problems, but within a limited area, because they've had to focus on it. And so as a result of that, most of our customer interaction is going to be with the level 1 analyst, because they have those broad skills, and they should also, and they have a lot of customer contact. Whereas the level 2 analyst is going to be more of the engineer, sort of focused on issues, they're going to have a lot less interaction with the customer directly. And so there has to be some kind of a interaction between the level 1 and the level 2, because the level 1 is dealing more with the customer. So how do we do that in a way which is respectful? You have to find that way, and there's some ideas there about how that can happen. So there's some other things there. If you're going to work in the service desk, what are some things you can do? Make sure you know the service level agreements. I've got 1 minute left. Basically, these are all just good things about what you can do to improve that. Now, the ticket needs to be closed. As I said, I've got 1 minute left, so this is going to cut off. When we close the ticket, we will be measured basically on the fact that that ticket being closed means that it is finished, right? If we get a call back the next day from our customer and they have the same issue, then we've closed a ticket that needs to be reopened, and that's a big problem. So that's the type of thing that's usually measured in the system. And so we need to make sure that we are thorough and we do resolve the issue before we close it. We're going to finish in like 10 seconds. Okay, so thanks, students. I'm sorry we kind of have run out of the problem. As it says there, the root cause, very big idea with respect to problems. Problem has a root cause. That's the difference between a problem and an incident. In a problem, it's recurring, and we have to find that root cause and fix it. Okay, and that's what that's about. There's a bunch of different ways that we can get some on that. I can't believe I have run out of time. You guys may be all right with this. Just some more ideas.